Greetings, vlog. You are catching me this time at the end of a day. Been doing that a lot lately, kind of just getting right into the swing of the day and not getting to vlog until later, but very intense day today. It's a Wednesday. Wednesdays are my check-in days with my leads, and there just happened to be a lot to cover today. I think the theme still applies from yesterday, running smoothly, but running fast. So, in fact, probably the smoother you can run, the faster you can go, right? It's like the less friction on a surface, the faster an object gliding through it can move, that kind of concept. So it would make sense that we were moving both quickly and quickly and smoothly. But today we had check-ins. So we checked in with our growth team, our operations lead, and our finance lead. The things that we covered are on the growth side. Right now, our head of growth is working towards growing our top line production. Of course, that's probably always growth's job. However, there's always, here's one thing that I think you guys are going to find valuable. If you've noticed that your growth is not linear and there's always something in the way of achieving growth, then, that's just the way growth is. So for example, right now we are kind of growing, we're trying to direct more ad spend to different advertising platforms, because in theory, the more you're spending, the more customers you're acquiring, right? Because these advertisement platforms, they have a product, right? Like anything that's free for you to use, you're the product. So you use Instagram, you use Facebook, you use Google, all this stuff is free. But advertisers like us, we pay them for inventory, right? Whether it's keywords or whether it's placements, or, you can buy inventory on different publishers' blogs. So for example, popular blog, like I'm gonna make one up, but let's say Earn Your Leisure or The Points Guy or any one of these blogs, you see banners on the sides, right? All of that is inventory that they can list for sale. And it's kind of like a bidding auction place, like a marketplace. So it's not that they're going individually and approving loop. They're saying, hey, I'm willing to sell this real estate and this real estate for this price. And then different bidders will bid on, okay, I like this publisher because, in our case, our audience is very financially aspirational. So anywhere that there are things like budgeting, saving, home buying, car insurance, how to fix your car, stuff like that, that's kind of where we want to advertise. So we buy bulk inventory across many different publishers on different platforms like Media Alpha and others. So, and then, I don't want to say perfected, but we've optimized the cost that we're willing to pay, how much we're willing to bid on keywords, on certain placements, on certain publishers, and on social. So across all the digital channels, we've kind of learned what we're willing to pay because we understand very clearly what we get in return. And so we have a very efficient customer acquisition machine. I do wish that more of our growth was coming through organic virality. So people saying, yo, Loop is the best thing ever, and they're telling people about it. And that is easily far and away the best growth. It's just a little bit harder when you're in a category that is low affinity, right? So people generally don't like their car insurance. They don't believe in their car insurers and so on. And that's our big brand opportunity. I think we can stand out. And I think we do stand out amongst car insurers, particularly with the customer base that we're serving. But it's still not something people have naturally as much affinity for. Like, for example, people naturally have more affinity for sports, right? Like, you care about your team. People naturally have more affinity for their geography, right? Their city, right? Dallas, proud, San Antonio, Nashville, New York City, LA, Sacramento. Like people really fuck with where they're from. People naturally have a lot of affinity for their pets, right? People naturally have a lot of affinity for music and culture. People naturally have super high affinity for sneakers, for clothing, for your loved ones. If you're in health insurance, or sorry, not health insurance, but anything related to that. People can be enthusiastic about fitness. People can be enthusiastic about, a million different things. But what they're not enthusiastic about, definitely, is car insurance. It's a super low affinity category. And anytime you're operating in a category that's low affinity, then basically the less organic a category is, the more ad spend is associated. Like the more ad spend plays a big role, right? So 1 second, as I forgot to hook up my audio gear, and maybe the audio's good, but I want to make sure that it is. Check. Okay. Check. Okay, great. Hopefully maybe there was no difference in the audio, maybe there is. But the more organic a category, obviously organic is someone telling someone without you having to pay them for it, and so your customer acquisition cost is going to be lower. But that tends to exist in categories that are more crowded, right? I don't know if that's true, but anyway, the more organic something is, the less advertising plays a role. The less organic something is, the more advertising plays a role. So there's a reason that auto insurers, are the biggest, literally the biggest advertisers in the country. Geico, Progressive, USAA, State Farm, Allstate, Liberty Mutual. I think those are the big ones. Every time you watch a game, they're advertising because people don't, we established it. It's low affinity. And so they just play a lot at the top of the funnel so that when you need insurance, you kind of just remember their jingle, you remember they're top of mind, right? So anyway, point is that, so the more we're spending, right, now that you know our approach to, spend, and that we want to spend more, right? Because we're not spending blindly anymore. We're at a point where we have a well-oiled machine. We know how much we get for every dollar that we spend, and we know exactly where we spend, with exactly which publishers, on which platforms, and we're optimized on that regard. So therefore, think about it as an investment, right? If you're buying a stock that performs reliably well and gets you a 20% yield, you're going to want to buy as much of that stock as possible, right? Now, what happens is that sometimes there's limitations on how much you can spend, because I'm getting into like real operator shit, right? But basically, your customer acquisition costs, your CAC efficiency deteriorates, so it gets worse as you spend more, right? So for example, all of of that ad spend when you're spending billions of dollars like Geico and so on. There's no way it's efficient, just in general, right? Because there's only so many, all these channels that are very specific, like Media Alpha, and stuff like that. Like, you lose precision they have more money to spend, have bigger budgets than there are very specific channels that they can put those monies. So they end up getting broader and broader and broader with their spend, where instead, like, they might allocate a certain percentage of their budget towards these digital super optimized channels, but at a certain point, they're buying billboards, right? Billboards are intrinsically less efficient because you can't trace the spend, or like you can't trace who saw it and who responded to it, right? And now put that at scale, you're buying tons of radio spots, tons of billboards, tons of commercials on TV, and your spend, just the broader it gets, because you have so much money you need to put to work, the less efficient and fully traceable it is. And the narrower that spend, most commonly, it's because you're in these channels that are hyper efficient, and you're, like, every dollar for us really matters. So we're like watching how much we're bidding on a per keyword, per everything basis, right? And so if that's the case, you can only grow your spend. We only grow our spend as the efficiency allows for it. So for example, if we spend 50K one month, we can spend 200K the next month, but the jump from 50 to 200, we're not going to, because we're so meticulous about the return on the dollar invested. You're having to manage that spend and slowly increase it so that it's perfectly efficient. Slowly increase it to the point you get to 200, and then slowly increase from the point you get to 200 to 400 and even then, at a certain point, like around $1 million a month, you are just going to lose some efficiency because you start to enter budgets where there are bigger competitors, right? So it's hard to buy $1 million of inventory on a bunch of niche publishers. You eventually have to start buying inventory on bigger publishers, and those bigger publishers have bigger ad dollars that are going to them from bigger companies. And so then you get into bidding wars, and it drives the customer acquisition cost up. So that's a little bit around how the paid advertising game works. I do wish we were able to grow. You're definitely in a better position if you can grow without paid ads. I've never been in this situation before as an operator, because I've normally been in more brand rich things or smaller niche channels, but we're in a really, really big market where advertising does drive results. And our segment is so specific that we can actually direct our spend specific to our segment in a way, and in places where our competitors are not necessarily, they don't necessarily care about the same customer. So we get good results. However, there are always different variables that place pressure on your ability to grow your spend. Because remember, you want to grow your spend. If you're getting a 20% return on that stock, buy as much of it as possible. However, whether it's a combination of the availability of inventory from publishers, whether it's a combination of optimizing our quote flow, right? So where people go and buy, because we're in an underwriting business right now, we're not allowing for certain risks, like for example, Kias and Hyundais. I'm not sure if you guys saw like those TikTok videos, but Kias and Hyundais are being stolen with literal pens. Okay, someone discovered you can steal a Kia and a Hyundai literally with a pen. Look it up. And they were stealing them, and they went viral, and people started stealing Kias and Hyundais and taking them for joyrides. And guess what? If somebody has full coverage on a Kia and a Hyundai, and it gets stolen because some asshat saw it in a TikTok video, the insurer has to pay that. And your premium with your insurance company is probably only $150 a month. So now, if we're insuring a Kia that we've collected, let's say someone's been a customer for 5 months, they've paid us $800, and now we have to replace the full value of a stolen Kia, which is like $40,000. You're going to be upside down on that. So we're constantly monitoring all the trends in the real world, and we made the call that we don't want to insure those specific models of Kias and Hyundais that have been compromised. And as a result, our loss ratio, which is the measure of how much premium we collect to claims we pay out, has gotten way better because it takes a lot of $150 to pay for $40,000, let's say, because also the value of cars have gone up. Anyway, I'm getting rabbit hole-y, but hopefully just the thought process. It's none of you guys probably are running insurance companies, so the very specific things that I'm dealing with are probably not that applicable to you. But what I want to be applicable to you is is the thought process. I think my point with this whole thing is everything is nuanced, right? And every time we get growing, every time we get rocking and rolling, something else comes up. And it's like, okay, dang, like right now it's the Kias. Who could have guessed the Kias and Hyundais, right? Nobody, because it's just something that happened out in the real world and, in the macro. So whether it's that or whether it's like, okay, one of our partners' data was hacked, that didn't happen, but just like as an example, or, my friend was servicing student loans and then Biden forgave a ton of student loans and then it shrank his customer pool. Some things are in your control, some things are out of your control. One of your key employees leaves at a time when you needed them to do XYZ, or in another case, we had a key employee with a family emergency, right? And that person's still around, but they dealt with a death in their family and and all of a sudden your production slowed at a time when you thought it would ramp. A million things that can happen. And so I think super long rabbit hole, but hopefully just peeling the onion back on how kind of a venture approach to growth marketing works. It's like all these considerations, and not to mention, we weren't even doing the vlog when we were optimizing our spend, right? So there is a time when you don't even want to spend that much because you're still figuring out which channels work for you, what messaging works for you, what creative works for you, what publishers you want to buy with, how much money you get from your customer. In theory, you should know, but in actuality, what percentage of them churn month 1, month 2, month 3, much more, month 5, month 6. On average, how long does a customer stick around over the duration of their life with you, which is what we call a customer lifetime value. And so then you run a calculation. Is what's the lifetime value relative to how much it costs you to get them, the LTV to CAC. And you want to be at 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. You want to make 4 times as much as it costs you to acquire a customer, or 3 times as much that it makes you to acquire a customer. 2-to-1 is okay. I think you would have room to improve if it costs you, if you make on that customer twice as much as it makes, twice as much as it costs you to bring them in, that's pretty good. 1-to-1 is you're breaking even. So anything less than 1, you're in the red. 2-to-1 is considered okay, but you want to have enough like meat on the bone. 3-to-1 and 4-to-1 is ideal, because if you're at 3-to-1, 4-to-1, then that means that for every one customer, they're generating sufficient kind of returns for you to have enough money to invest in more marketing and get more customers, and you're growing at a 3-to-1 clip, 4-to-1 clip, which unlocks big growth potential. And then in theory, you should be saying, if you're following, you should be saying, well, wouldn't you want it to be as many times to 1, right? Like, wouldn't you want to make 5-to-1, 6-to-1? But the general thinking in the venture community is, if you're at 5-to-1 plus, then you're not growing fast enough, right? So like if your economics are too good, then the classic venture wisdom would suggest, remember how we talked about efficiency, right? So like you can be super efficient if you're spending a little bit, and if you're growing super slowly and you're being very super efficient. and you deteriorate that if with scale of spend and with speed of spend, right? So the general thinking is if you're 5 to 1 or over, like you're just too fucking efficient. So you need to be growing faster and essentially intentionally deteriorate your efficiency, because 3 to 1 to 4 to 1 is kind of seen as a sweet spot. So anyway, you could look that up as CAC to LTV ratio, but yeah, that's kind of how venture operations think about growth. So today I had a chat about that with our head of growth, whom, you know, we're facing some roadblocks, so we want to spend more, okay, which is a good problem to have. Like, we have good economics, we want to spend more. Right now we have, as I was saying with the Kia Hyundai thing, like we block those, so a certain percentage of traffic is not getting through, which means that's less addressable traffic, right? And then there's other things too, like right now we're kind of somewhat tight on, we don't allow DUIs, we don't allow a lot of major violations, so we've intentionally restrained some of the traffic that's able to get through, and as a result we're in a place now where we probably have restrained a little too much traffic, and we need to look for some opportunities to open up that funnel so more traffic gets to a point where they get to a quote, because once they get to a quote, we have a certain percentage of people that get to a quote will bind. Okay, so that's what we call our quote to bind ratio. So we have lead to quote ratio, which is how many people that give us their name, email address, and address, they become a lead. What percentage of people go from traffic to lead, from lead to quote, and from quote to bind. And bind for us is like we issue a policy, which is a purchase. So that is funnel science, right? It's like literally take your transaction, okay? Take your transaction flow in your business, whether you're driving traffic, most commonly I would imagine you're driving traffic, you're selling through, let's say, online. So you want to track what percentage of people are landing on your website. From the people that land on the website, what percentage of them start to fill out a form, and what percentage from the form submit, and what percentage of people that submit the form then follow up and buy. That's your very simplistic funnel. And you can basically, there's going to be holes at different points of the funnel, and you can seal those holes, but it takes careful inquiry. Like, okay, why? You speak it to users, you're using your common sense. Okay, the call to action, or so the button, is way down low, or it's not clear enough, or I'm going for the sale too soon. You land on the website, it says buy now. Maybe it's got to be learn more, and then after you click learn more, then it's buy now, right? So those are the things that we do in kind of optimization, but you shouldn't get bogged up in optimization. You should get bogged up in making sure that what you're offering is compelling enough in the first place. Because I've seen there's a whole school of marketers that over fucking optimize, and it's the ClickFunnels gang, right? It's like, you've seen those people, and they want to sell you with some bullshit webinar, and they get you the webinar, and they swear that a certain copy written a certain way and presented a certain thing will produce a certain click-through ratio and blah blah blah. It's like, I'm not saying it doesn't work, it's just like it's got a local maximum. Like it's like pressure sales tactics converted to online, right? It's like, I guess, man, I've never seen, like, maybe like freelance, or like, I don't know, it's the whole coach, like digital coach era. I don't know, like they find some success, but I'm telling you right now, as someone who's, and this is I'm very opinionated, right? So this is my opinion. It's my opinion, but my opinion has some merit in this space. And I would say that that's not the game that you really want to be playing. Not if you're looking to build a company, right? Those people are looking to make themselves rich. They want to enrich themselves. And maybe many of you watching want to do that too. Shit, I want to do that, right? But enriching yourself through manipulative tactics and stuff like that is going to get you maybe some short-term cash, but it's not going to actually show you the most valuable skills that have the greatest transferability towards building something valuable and that can scale and reach a lot of people and help a lot of people and really have you break through to, incidentally, greater levels of wealth. But that's not really the outcome that you should care about. The outcome is being a good enough operator that you know how to build shit that helps a lot of people. And because you cracked ClickFunnels marketing, it's not going to get you there. That's my spiel. But, take it with a pound of salt. But yeah, talked about expanding the lead to quote ratio right now is a focus for us. And then on the operation side, talked about, what did we talk about? It was like 8 hours ago at this point, so I forget. But we talked about where we are relaunching our captive agents. So because the product experience is in a really good place. You don't want to have a sales team prematurely. In fact, a lot of organizations that have big sales teams, you have two buckets, right? You have companies that have big sales teams because they have figured out their product. Their product works really well, and like they've kind of reached their peak of organic sales, like truly fully optimized organic sales, something like Salesforce. And then they have like these enterprise sales teams, and they dial for dollars and they drive adoption, right? So that's kind of the good sales team approach. But then you have like bad sales. Like you have, if a company's product sucks and their brand sucks, then you need a lot of sales. And in the past, I would say we were in that bucket. Like we drove a lot of premium. We were selling $3 or $4 million every month, but so much of that was driven through sales because our product standalone was not good enough, right? Like people would go to the website, tamper around, they wouldn't buy on their own because the flow was not great. And so we had a lot of high touch follow-up. And so we decided to turn that paradigm around. We shut down the sales team. We shut down a lot of that noise. And for 6 months, we focused on making sure that the product was really good. And now we're at a point where we feel like, okay, the product's really good. We got to work on the lead to quote thing, like we just talked about, right? So we got to allow more traffic to get through, and a greater percentage of people that get through to a quote are buying. And importantly, a great percentage of people that are buying are not needing to call in. So the self-service is really high. And then of course we send a little survey. Those stupid little surveys that you get when you join something actually matter for us because they help us understand how satisfied our members are when they join. The satisfaction is 3 times higher. The churn, right? So how many people join and then leave is 3 times lower, right? So satisfaction is high, churn is low. We're seeing all the right signals, okay? The customer acquisition cost is in check, so we want to spend more. Our margins have increased because we're more efficient. So the business is in a good place. And so basically now we feel like we have enough figured out such that when we reintroduce our sales team, we're in the first sales bucket. We can be in the first sales bucket, which is things are more dialed in, and now sales can augment your efforts versus you're overcompensating for a bad product with sales. So talked about that. And then with finance, we got into contribution margins, which is like, basically what is after all of your variable costs and related operating costs, and then your direct marketing acquisition costs, how much is left over, and that is your contribution margin. So that's what you're on a per unit basis, the net margin that's contributing to kind of your overall balance sheet, to your cash stockpile. The challenge is that contribution margin is not, so there's a technical like generally agreed upon accounting principles, which is called GAAP. Let me see if I got that right. It stands, yeah, generally accepted accounting principles, right? Which is like the CPA, first certified public accountant community, basically agrees on like revenues this is the definition. These, like all these definitions. Problem is that contribution margin is not a GAAP approved thing. Is it GAAP? Let me see. Let me double check my fractional CFO. Yeah. The contribution margin is not a GAAP approved statement, and yet you hear people ask about it all the time. So I think this is true kind of in venture as a whole, but and probably in any business, but in every industry, business, and so on, there's like measures that are very agreed upon, and then measures that have some room for interpretation. So contribution margin generally, definitely, generally means variable costs and your direct marketing costs, what's left. That's kind of the general idea. However, it's a little tricky with a startup because when you layer in your direct acquisition cost, you have a certain period of time that typically it'll take you to make that money back, which is called the payback period. So how do you express your contribution margin when you're net negative when you first acquire that customer and you don't make money back until month 9, right? So basically contribution margin only makes sense for at-scale businesses that spend a predictable amount in marketing every month. They have their churn, their revenues, all their measures are basically super seasoned. Their growth is dialed in. It's repeatable. They've been growing at the same clip for X amount of time. Their cost basis is everything in the business is normalized. Then contribution margin makes sense, which is why public companies often use that expression, or bigger like private equity scale companies. But in a startup, it's just a trickier measure to use, because the only way that you could do it in a startup is if you look at past cohorts. But the problem is you should be in a startup improving so much that by the time you look at, like for us, if we look at our contribution margin for the second half of 2023, already our churn, as I just said, we launched a new product, our churn has improved 3x. So you can't get the contribution margin for this cohort until 6 months from now, because we sell 6 months policies. So you have to wait until August to see the contribution margin for the cohort that we acquired in February. And that's not that useful because it's just too big of a lag measure. So what you're going to find is that every KPI, key performance indicator, has a lead measure and a lag measure, right? So the lag measure being the one that takes the most time to develop. It's usually the most comprehensive and the most useful. But but it takes a long time to get. So you can't wait 6 months, 3 months, before you can make your mind about if that thing is improving or not. So every lag measure has a lead measure, right? So we measure 6-month retention as a lag measure, but then we measure 30-day retention as a lead measure, right? So keep that in mind. Every measure has a lag and a lead. And then the last thing that we did today was, besides, I got it. Shit. Fuck. Dang, it's blurry now. I gotta get out a monthly investor report, so I gotta go. But no. There you go. So anyway, that was the day. As you can see, if I don't do these vlogs in the morning, I'm not as fresh, but I do think that information was useful. So hopefully you got some value, and I'm gonna call it a vlog. It's 5:25. I probably got to be here. Probably got to be here for another hour. So I started at 9 today, and I'll get done at 6:30. And it's just a day in the life. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.